Hi folks, hope you're enjoying and benefiting from our guitar lesson series. Remember, it's essential that you watch these lesson videos in order. Each lesson leads into the next, and you won't get the big picture if you skip any of the steps. Many of you have been searching for these answers for years. You might be tempted to jump ahead and look at lesson 24 because you're into the blues, but if you don't know your intervals and modes from lesson 12 and 17, you just ain't going to get it. Consider purchasing the 150-page official course handbook for $19.95 from our website at www.absolutelyunderstandguitar.com. You'll find that link multiple places here on our YouTube channel. Each of the 32 video lessons has a corresponding printable page that you can view to help with review and memorization. All of the charts and graphs I create in the videos are reprinted there. The package also includes our amazing chord, scale, and arpeggio encyclopedia containing most every useful finger pattern known to man. Reserve your copy today. If you like what you're learning here, tell all your friends and like and subscribe to our channel. So enjoy this lesson and continue on, and you will absolutely understand guitar.
Hi, welcome back to Absolutely Understand Guitar. I'm Scotty West. Wow, today we do the biggest show in the entire series. You've learned an awful lot about music, all about intervals, scales, and chords, but you could still be forgiven for wondering, well, how does this explain all these songs I'm hearing? How does it all come together? Today we're going to begin to find out, and in the process we're going to look at the fascinating world of modes. This is lesson 17, so make sure your book is open to page 17. You'll also need your slide rule and scale finger charts. It couldn't hurt to have a keyboard instrument handy to look at as well. All set? Here we go. Hi, welcome back. Boy, we're in the thick of it today, and I'm not even going to take much time to review because I have an incredible amount of stuff to tell you about today. This is huge. A lot of you have heard of modes, for example, and you may even know some things about modes, but if you're like most people, you just don't get it. You're awfully confused about what that stuff is and why you would need to know any of that stuff. Interestingly enough, it is so significant. It's right at the core of explaining how these songs work. Now, what I just want to quickly review with you is, just in a moment or two, is the stuff that you need to be working on, which is a couple of lessons back. Remember, we've got our whole page of intervals here. You need to get all that down. Remember, all of these more complex patterns are all made up of intervals. Your 13 intervals, you have to memorize how large they are, the fingerings, your inverted intervals, all that stuff. Now, the next thing we're going to the last couple of hours, we've been into the world of scales. So the other big volume of information you've got to be working on is all this stuff. And you've got all your different scale patterns that you've got to try to memorize, your 14 must-know scales. And remember, you also have all of these finger charts as well. We don't have to look at this in detail, but you know all these color-coded finger charts we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks. And you need to make sure that you've got, that you're working on that. You have a lot of scale fingerings to learn. Last time we also listened to all of these different scales to find out what they sound like. Remember the 4 ways to know your pitch patterns. All of these scales, eventually you have to know what they sound like too. That's the key to improvising, which is a lot about what we're going to talk about today, interestingly enough. Not just improvising for improvising's sake, but also about how are melodies created and how does the melody of the song relate to the chord, the harmonic structure of the song itself. And so here's some new information for today. You're gonna love this. This is so big, and a lot of people never understand this in their entire careers. Let's start like this. Those of you who have been playing for a while have probably noticed that there are hundreds sometimes of songs out there in the guitar repertoire, in the popular music repertoire, that all have the same chords in them. Have you ever noticed that? And I'm going to suggest that one of the all-time most common sets of chords that you've ever seen in a song goes like this. And we'll write this up in this corner of the chart. Those of you who are just starting out might not have seen this, but those of you who have been playing for a while might go, oh, yeah, I've seen like dozens of songs that have these same chords in it. G major, C major, D major, E minor and A minor. Isn't that true? Haven't you seen dozens of songs that have those same chords in it? One of the songs that I'm going to use today, because I think that everybody's probably heard this song at one time or another, is the song Take It Easy by the Eagles. All of you must have heard that at some point or another. And that song, I can't even think now. We're going to look at the solo section of the song, particularly to see how the melody works with the chords. But those are, for all intents and purposes, all the chords that are actually in that song. It's the year 2000 right now. A band that seems to almost every song they play with this in it is Third Eye Blind. So many of their songs, G, C, D, E minor, A minor. You might think back to some old Bob Dylan songs that you know that have those same chords. Everything. It's and now, if we take this beyond the realm of pop music, you're going to find out that all popular music, no matter what style it is, the church hymns that you hear in church on Sunday, all of those could be played with a set of chords like that. Remember, there are 12 different keys that you can play in, and the example that we're looking at here is simply an example that's in the key of G. When we look at the slide rule in a little while, you'll understand that this way of thinking about music can be done in any one of the 12 keys, but because so many pop rock songs are written in the key of G, we're going to investigate this example. Now, what we're going to be talking about today a little bit is for all of you who are particularly interested in learning how to improvise or learning how to compose music. The big question is, how do I jam? How do I make up guitar solos? How do the notes in scales, which of course has been our subject for the last couple of weeks, relate to how the chord progression, the progression of chords within the song? And it all has to do with these modes. And a lot of people come in to take lessons from me and know something about modes. In fact, I have people that have actually gone to music school and taken music theory courses and gotten a degree in music, and I ask them, do you understand about modes? And they go, well, yes. And I go, well, what good does it do you to know that stuff? And very often I get the answer, I don't really know. They just taught me this stuff and I memorized it so that I could pass my test in music theory class, but I don't really understand the functional use of these modes in my playing. Well, I've tried to cultivate a way. I seem to be the only person on the planet who can really get people to understand modes. I've tried to cultivate a way of explaining modes to people completely from the functional side. And many of us have already seen this. Those of you who have been playing for a while, those of you maybe who've been playing for a long time, when it comes to improvising, learning how to jam, to do the guitar solos and make up the music on the spot, we all kind of remember the day when we were given this. I remember it so well. My friend Rob, when I was in high school, was a guitar player, a little bit further along than me, and I would go over to his house on Saturday afternoons, and he would say something to me like this. He would go, I'm going to strum a set of chords. I'm going to strum a bunch of chords, and I want you to play this scale, this particular scale. And in the example that we're going to look at today, that scale is going to be a G major scale. Now, you know our good old friend, the Ionian mode, the major scale, the one that the number system is based on, the one that we use to measure all the other ones by. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Remember, that scale is mostly whole steps except between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. Now, if you pull out your scale fingering chart for the Ionian mode, take a look at Ionian number 3. I think that's the one, right? Yes, Ionian 3. It's down in the lower left-hand corner of your Ionian finger chart. That's the one I'm going to be using just to show you, because that's one of the easy ones. It has no finger shifts in it. And what you're going to do, remember, do is under your second finger in that pattern, and I want you to play a G major scale. So what you're going to do is you're going to put that second finger on the 3rd fret of your guitar. That's probably where your first dot is. Second finger. And that's going to be do, and you're going to play that pattern. Hopefully you've been practicing this for several weeks now. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, whoops, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Now, we all remember the day when, like I said, Rob told me, okay, I'm going to strum some chords, and you're going to play a particular scale, and what you're going to find out is that all of the notes in that scale sound pretty good with all the chords I'm going to play. So it's like you're up and running already. You're going to be improvising already, and you're going to sound kind of like halfway like Eric Clapton already. Now, I've made this little tape here, a little jam tape. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to show you how to make your own jam tapes and stuff like this. And remember that song I mentioned, Take It Easy by the Eagles? What I've just done here is I've done a little arrangement of the solo section in the middle of that song, when there's that little guitar solo in the middle of the song. Now, first time through, I'm going to strum the chords, and what you're going to notice is it's this set of chords that we mentioned before, G, C, D, E minor, and A minor, and I'll actually call them out as I play them. When the song loops around and starts again, the rhythm guitar part is going to come up on the tape, and I'm going to stop playing the chords, and what I'm actually going to do is begin to play that G major scale. And that's all I'm going to do at first. And what you're going to see is that all of these notes that I play in this scale sound pretty good with that set of chords right there. Now, after we go through that one time and the song loops around again, I'm actually going to do a little bit of an improvisation. I'm going to improvise a little. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that all of the notes that I use in this little melody are going to be notes that are out of that G major scale. And you're going to be going, wow, gee, it's really that simple that if I just know the scale that the song is based on, that I'm already halfway like Eric Clapton already? And I go, yeah, but then there's a little more to it, and that's what we're going to get into when we get into the subject of modes. But here we go. I'm going to play this tape now. I'm going to talk a little bit while I do it, so I'll keep you posted with what I'm doing here. But you might recognize this as the middle section of Take It Easy by the Eagles. Ready? Here we go. And I'm going to strum the chords and name the chords as I play them first. Take a second for this tape to start up. Ready? G, G, D, C, G, D, C, G, E minor, D, C, G, A minor, C, E minor. Now here it where it loops around again. Here's a G major scale. Notice how all these notes sound quite good with all of those different chords. Now here comes the third time. I'm going to improvise a little using these same notes. Not bad, huh? All of those notes that I played sounded pretty good with all of those chords that I played, right? Wow, boy, that was so easy. If you just memorize the scale fingerings on your charts there, I'm going to be like halfway like Eric Clapton already. This improvising stuff appears to be so easy. So now I'm going to write up here. What we're actually going to look at is kind of the way I always introduce this is kind of a conversation or an argument between three people. And the first guy is the guy that just had this experience right now, and he is dumbfounded. Oh my goodness, this is so easy. It appears that soloing is really easy. It appears that I can play one scale, and in this case it was a G major scale. I can play one scale over several chords. Wow. I can play one scale over several chords. Wow, that appears to make music incredibly easy, doesn't it? You thought this improvising stuff was all going to be like really difficult, but wow, it looks so simple now. If I just know the correct scale to go along with the tune, then I'm all set already. Now, those of you who have maybe taken some piano lessons and stuff, and and learn that everything has to do with the major scale and all that. We certainly have implied that in this show, too. That a given song is based on the major scale. You're going to be very comfortable with this concept. Didn't they kind of teach you when they taught you the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do thing? That's like the thing that all music was made out of? Well, there is a way to look at music like that, and it's kind of the old-fashioned way. But if you look at it that way, that's a little bit too simple to be true. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. Everybody who starts off playing this way, wow, I can play one scale over several different chords, this set of chords up here. You have this initial rush. You have this period where, wow, this is easy, and everything sounds great, and you can't believe it's that simple that it is to improvise. And the truth of the matter is that it isn't, because if you play that way for a while, you start to get a little bit bored with your own playing. You start to find yourself doing the same things over and over again. Things start to get a bit stale. You also begin to notice that, yes, all of those notes sound pretty good with all of those chords, but you begin to notice that each one of those notes sounds better or worse with any one of those chords. Like a note that sounds really good with the G chord, it sounds okay with the C chord, but it really doesn't sound as good as it did with the G chord. And any one of the individual notes that you're playing, you notice sometimes it sounds really good and other times it doesn't sound quite so good. And the third thing is, even though you sound halfway like Eric Clapton, you don't sound completely like Eric Clapton. And you're wondering, how come the guys on the radio do this so much better than me? What do they know that I don't know? Well, at some point in your life, another person is going to come in, and our second person in our argument right here, and it's going to suggest something that, in a way, maybe we should have seen right from the beginning, but we didn't. He comes in and he goes, no, you can't do that. Whatever made you think that you could play one scale over several different chords? Look at the set of chords up here. Now, there's a G major chord in that song, so maybe it shouldn't be too surprising that we can play a G major scale over that G major chord. Remember, chords and scales have a real tie to one another. But look at this, there's an E minor chord in that song, too. Whatever made us think that a G major scale would sound good over an E minor chord? I mean, don't they have like completely different root notes? I mean, that's supposed to be a starting on G, and that's supposed to be starting on E. And this is a minor chord. This is a sad sounding minor chord. And this is a happy sounding major chord over here. We just learned last time, let me pull this out of the way here for a second. We just learned last time, over the last couple of weeks, that there are both major scales and minor scales. I mean, we suggested that you use all of these different scales all the time. So here's all these minor scales. When do you use those? Doesn't it sort of make sense that a minor scale would probably be the scale that you would play over a minor chord? So again, I repeat, whatever made us think that we could play a G major scale over an E minor chord? Guy goes, yeah, that's right. Wow, how could it be that I can play one scale over several chords? It actually doesn't work that way. The second person comes in and says, no, you can't do that. No, when the chord changes, so must the scale change. In other words, doesn't it make sense when that E minor chord comes around that we should be playing some kind of E minor scale? And you go, yeah, actually that's true, isn't it? And I think I've mentioned this in a couple of previous lessons. See, a deeper way of looking at the scale chord relationships in songs is that there is, in fact, a separate scale for each chord in the song. And that explains why on our must-know list I put those 14 different scales, and I said you're going to be playing all of those scales every day. There are 5 chords in that Eagles song. And what that means is that you are actually playing 5 of the different scales on that must-know list on the previous page there. But the funny thing is, this guy still wants to argue back here. He wants to go, okay, I only sounded halfway like Eric Clapton, but nonetheless, that sounded pretty good. I don't believe what this other guy's saying. I believe that, yeah, maybe I've got to practice a little more, but I believe that I can actually play one scale over several different chords. And this guy is going, no, you have to play a separate scale with each chord. And so they're arguing back and forth. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. Yes, you can. No, you can't. They're arguing back and forth. Well, finally, a third person enters the conversation and settles the whole thing because they go, oh, well, you guys are just confused about the subject of modes. In a way, both of you are right. And they go, huh? What's he talking about? Both of us are right? This guy's saying that you can play one scale over several chords, and this guy is saying that you have to change the scale every time the chord changes. Well, this guy comes in and goes, you guys are just confused about the subject of modes because, see, what you're going to find out is this. The same set of notes is several different scales. Huh? What is he talking about? The same set of notes is several different scales. You know that G major scale that you were playing? The weird thing is you actually weren't playing the G major scale the whole time. How do you like that? Because all of those notes that you were playing are actually part of several different scales. So what modes is all about, the fascinating world of modes is this. The same set of notes is several different, D-I-F-F-E-R, is several different scales. Huh? What the heck is he talking about? The same set of notes is several different scales. The only question is which note in the set is functioning as do. That is, which note in the set is functioning as the root note. Now, you probably still don't see exactly what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to show you a little more in depth. Let me ask you this question. Some of you who hadn't had any previous music education of any kind are not going to be able to answer this question, but those of the rest of you who have taken some music lessons or had some music in school or something may be able to answer this question. It goes like this. Which of the 12 alphabet letter musical notes is the most famous note of all times? If you've heard of one musical note out of the 12, which one is it? Take a second, and I'll tell you the answer. Isn't it C? Haven't you all heard of like the note middle C on a piano? Isn't C the most famous musical note? Some of you have only played the guitar, for example, will go, no, I thought maybe E or A or but you got to trust me, when it comes to the totality of musical instruments, C is the most famous alphabet letter musical note of all times. Why is that? Well, one thing you might recall is back when we were looking at notation in music and we were looking at key signatures, we looked at the scale of C major because it was the one major scale key that had no sharps and flats in it. Remember that? We'll look at the slide rule in a moment, but let me remind you that if I just play the white keys on the piano, starting with C, let's look up here at the keyboard for a moment. If I start right on here on C, which remember is just to the left of the two black keys, if I just play the white keys on the piano, I get a do-re-mi scale in the key of C, right? Why is that? Well, remember, here's E and F, right? And here's B and C. Notice how they turn up to be right where 3 and 4 is. And 7 and 8. And remember, we knew in a major scale that that's where the half steps fall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. See, there's that half step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 7, 8. Notice no black key. 7, 8, those two notes are a half step apart. So everybody knows that C is the most famous musical note because if you took a few weeks or a few months of piano lessons, the first pattern they ever showed you was the C major scale because they figured that was easy because they didn't have to have you play any of those nasty black keys. Another thing, if you ever played any like wind instruments, like a clarinet or a saxophone or a flute, I'm oversimplifying here a little bit, but you might know that most of the non-sharp and flat notes are fingered right up the middle of the horn. They're like the easy notes to play, and to play the sharps and flats, not only do you have to control the middle notes on the horn, but you also have these side keys that you have to press in order to make sharps and flats. So even on those instruments, a lot of times, the very first pitch pattern that we ever learn is a C major scale. Now, just to get ourselves hooked up with the slide rule here for a moment, let's prove that to ourselves. Remember, the major scale on your slide rule here is in the upper left-hand corner of the side where the scales are. The other side is all about chords, but this side over here is all about scales. And what we need to see here is the upper left-hand corner of the slide rule right here. You might recall that remember, this is the Ionian mode, which is simply another name for the major diatonic scale. Once again, here's the number system: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, right? Notice if I put C in it, note number 1, which means that I'm playing in the key of C. No sharp or flat notes come up at all. To play a C major scale on the piano is just all the white keys. Now, I want to, just right now, I want to point out another thing. If you look at all these other rows, here's these names of these other scales that we've looked at: Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. Notice how there are no sharps and flats in the C major scale up here. What that also means is there are no sharps and flats in any of these scales. You don't see any sharp or flat notes in here, do you? I'll explain why that is in a moment, but the big point is this. The C major scale has no sharps and flats. It's all the white keys on the piano, so that's usually the first scale pattern that they ever teach us because it's like the easiest one. You don't have any of those nasty black keys you have to play. So for the rest of all times, if you walk up to somebody and you say to them, all right, if I play just the white keys on a piano, what very famous pitch pattern am I playing? And everybody goes, oh, you're playing a C major scale. And that's right. I am playing a C major scale. But I'm about to show you that actually that's not the only thing that it could be construed that I'm playing by just playing the white keys on the piano. In fact, the white keys on the piano would only function as a C major scale if I simply decided that I was going to start on C. If I start there on C, then I get the half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, and that's what determines the fact, that's what gives me that very recognizable major scale sound. But what if I decide I'm going to be a radical? What if I decide I'm going to play the white keys on the piano, but I'm not going to start with C, I'm going to start with D. I'm not going to start with C, I'm going to start with D. And I'm going to play all the white keys on the piano again until I get up to the next higher D. Now listen to this. I'm playing exactly the same notes that I played just a moment ago, but now I'm starting on D. Listen to this. Does this sound like a do, re, mi scale anymore? Does this sound like a major scale? Do. I'll set you up so you hear that as do. Listen to this scale now. Boy, that didn't sound like a major scale, did it? Let's listen to that again. Wow, that's weird. That didn't sound like a major scale, did it? I played exactly the same notes that I played a moment ago, which was a C major scale. But now think of it this way. I'm not starting on C anymore. So first of all, I'm not playing a C scale of any kind, am I? A scale is always named after the note that it starts on. I'm starting on D now. What that means is I'm playing some kind of a D scale. I'm not playing a C scale anymore. Now, but what type of a scale is it? It's obviously not a major scale anymore, because it doesn't sound like a do, re, mi scale. But why is that? Why doesn't that scale sound like do, re, mi anymore? Can you tell? Take a second, think about it. Why doesn't that sound like a major scale anymore? Here's the answer. Remember, a do, re, mi scale only sounds like a do, re, mi scale if you play that pattern of intervals that goes whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Or in other words, mostly whole steps except between the 3rd and 4th and the 7th and 8th note. That worked with the white keys on the piano when I started on C. But now that I'm starting on D, look what happens. If this is now do, if this is now note number 1, Then I still have a whole step to 2 because I've got that black key in between here. So that's my half step in between. So 1, 2, this is still a whole step to 2, but look what happens next. In this scale, starting on D, the half step is no longer between the 3rd and 4th note. Since I started on D, 1, 2, that half step is in between the 2nd and 3rd notes. And then it's a whole step to the 4th note, and then a whole step to the 5th note, and then a whole step to the 6th note. But now look at this. This half step is no longer between 7 and 8. It's now between 6 and 7. And then a whole step back up to the octave note again, up to Do, the high D up there. 1 whole step, and then a half step between the 2nd and 3rd note, whole step, whole step, whole step to 6, and then a half step from 6 to 7, and then a whole step to 8. So we don't have the proper pattern of intervals anymore to be playing a major scale. We are playing a D scale of some sort. We're not playing a C major scale anymore. We're playing a D scale of some sort. But since the half steps are no longer between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, it's got to be some other type of scale. Now, let's see if we can figure out what number notes these would actually be relative to D being note number 1. Well, if this is note number 1, then it's a whole step, so this still must be note number 2. But remember, note number 2 and note number 3 are a whole step apart. But these next 2 notes are only a half step apart. So this can't possibly be note number 3 in this key, can it? 1, 2. This is only a half step above 2, so what number note is it? If it's only a half step above 2, if you look at your musical number system, or if you look at your slide rule, what number note is only a half step above 2? It's not note number 3, it's flat 3, isn't it? It's the flatted third. Now, do you remember this? What is the main musical significance of that note that we call the flatted third? We haven't talked a lot about chord structure yet, but when we were talking about scales, remember when we asked the question, what is the difference between a major scale or a minor scale? Or what's the difference between a major chord and a minor chord? Remember, it all had to do with that note number 3. Remember, major scales and major chords contain note number 3. The note that's 2 whole steps above the root. But minor scales and minor chords do not contain that note. They contain, the note that's 1/2 step lower than that, which we call the flatted third, which of course is only a half step above the 2. So these notes that a moment ago were functioning as a major scale in the key of C are now functioning as 1, 2, flat 3. They're functioning as some kind of sad sounding minor scale relative to D. Not only that, so it's 1 whole step to 2, half step to flat 3, whole step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6. Now look at this. Half step after 6. What number note is a half step above note number 6? It's not 7, is it? Remember, it's a whole step from 6 to 7. We have a half step from the 6th to the 7th note. What number note is a half step above 6? It's flat 7, isn't it? That note, relative to D being note number 1, is actually the flat 7, and then a whole step above that up to D, which is the root note again. That's 8. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. So what was functioning a moment ago as a C major scale is now functioning as some kind of D minor scale. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. Is this some weird bunch of notes that we've never heard of before? No. Interestingly enough, if we can flip back here and look at our previous page of all the scales that you need to know, right here, Dorian mode. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. If you take a major diatonic scale in any key, we're just looking at the key of C right now. If you take a major diatonic scale, but you start on its 2nd note, you're going to get that scale that goes 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. That's the Dorian mode. The Dorian mode is the 2nd mode of the major scale and always will be. And these things are represented by Roman numerals. I'm going to start to fill these in on this page. Remember, up here is our good old friend, the major diatonic scale. This is the 1st mode. This is mode number 1. So I'm going to put this Roman numeral over here. For Roman numeral 1 is the major diatonic scale. It's the 1st mode and always will be. Now, what we just discovered is that if you start on the second note, you're going to get the Dorian mode. So Dorian is the second mode. So I'm going to put a Roman numeral 2 right there. Now, let's go back again and let's look at the keyboard here. That was if I started on D. But now what if I start on the third note? What if I now start on E? Again, I'm going to play the white notes on the piano, which everybody thinks is a C major scale. But it's not if I start on E. Now notice this. E. Notice how the first interval in this scale is actually a half step. 1. What's a half step above note number 1? It's not 2, is it? If you remember your musical number system, the note that's a half step above 1 is flat 2. 1, flat 2. Notice how this certainly doesn't sound like a major scale anymore. Doesn't sound like our good old friend, the major scale, does it? 1, flat 2. But now notice the rest of the scale. Whole step to flat 3. Whole step to 4. Whole step to 5. But now look where this half step is. It's between the 5th and 6th note. So if this is note number 5, this has to be a half step above it. This is flat 6. Whole step to flat 7. Whole step to 8. This scale, it's the third mode of the major scale, starting on E relative to the key of C. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Some weird beast that we've never heard of before? No, once again, it's right here on our must-know list. I didn't write it too well, did I? The Phrygian mode. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Take a major scale, start on its third note, play the exact same notes for 1 octave. You no longer have a major scale. You have the Phrygian mode. The Phrygian mode is the third mode and always will be. And it's a minor scale again, isn't it? It's got a flat 3 in it. It's a minor scale. You're going to play this over minor chords. Remember, scales and chords go together in conventional music. They go together in very specific and predictable ways, and this is what we're looking at today. Now, back up here again. What if I start on F? Remember, the notes, the white keys, C major scale, right? Well, not if I start on the 4th note. Not if I start on F and play up 1 octave till I get to the next higher F. Listen to this scale. Didn't sound exactly like a do-re-mi scale, did it? Couldn't possibly. It doesn't have the right pattern of intervals. Look at this one. 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3. But now, when we were usually in a major scale expecting a half step after the third note, here we get a whole step to sharp 4. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, half step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to 8. Listen to this. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Doesn't sound exactly like a do-re-mi scale, does it? No. That's the Lydian mode right here. 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is the 4th mode of the major scale. Take a major scale and start on its 4th note, and you're going to get the Lydian mode, and you always will. And one thing that you're going to have to do over the next few weeks is you've got to memorize what order your modes are in. What order are they in so far? Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian. And I'll actually give you a little memory aid to help you memorize these modes in order. Back up to the keyboard again. Now I'm going to start on G, the 5th note of the major scale. Listen to this. Boy, it sounded a lot like the do-re-mi scale, didn't it? But what about that next to the last note there? See what's going on here? 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, but look at this. Half step from 3 to 4. Hey, it's beginning to look like our good old friend, the major scale again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those whole steps back until you get up to 6. But now look at this. Half step between the 6th and 7th note. So if that's 6, that can't be note number 7, can it? It's only a half step above 6. That note right there is flat 7. So the 5th mode of the major scale goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. Some weird beast we've never heard of before? No, that's the Mixolydian mode. Right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. Now this is a major scale again. It has a half step between 3 and 4, but it's not the major diatonic scale because it's got that flat 7 in it. This is the 5th mode of the major scale and always will be, and you're going to want to memorize that Mixolydian is the 5th mode. Now, we've only got 2 more to go. A major scale has 7 unique notes in it, doesn't it? So it must have 7 different modes. You could start on any one of the notes of that scale, and how many are there? 7, so you'll have 7 modes. We're on the 6th mode now. Relative to the key of C, if we start on A. Oh, by the way, look at your slide rule, too. We don't have to look at this close up right now, but if you look down the column here, you'll notice Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, and you'll notice that you're starting over 1 note each time, and we're going to look at that up close in just a minute. But if I start on A here, 1, whole step to 2, but look what happens here. Half step between the 2nd and 3rd notes. 1, 2, flat 3, whole step to 4, whole step to 5, half step now after the 5th note. 5, half step to flat 6, whole step to flat 7, whole step to 8. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. With that flatted 3rd, once again, we get this minor sounding chord, minor sounding scale. Some weird beast we've never heard of before? No, this is the Aeolian mode down here. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Aeolian is the 6th mode, and always will be, so it gets a Roman numeral 6. Finally, last mode, if I start on B, white keys on the piano, which everybody thinks is a C major scale, but not if I start on B. 1, look at this, this is another one that starts off with a half step. 1, flat 2, whole step to flat 3, whole step to 4, half step to flat 5. Interestingly enough, this is the first mode that we've played that doesn't have a 5 in it. Remember, what are the 3 most important notes in all of music? 1, 5, 8. Overwhelmingly, most of the scales and chords we play have 5s in them. This is an exception. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, whole step to 8. Listen to how weird this thing sounds. Doesn't sound like a do-re-mi scale anymore, does it? Some weird beast we've never heard of? No, way down here at the bottom of the page. Locrian mode, the last one. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Not anywhere near as common as a lot of the other scales we played, partially because of that flat 5 in it. But Locrian mode, nonetheless, is the 7th mode of the major scale. If you take a major scale in any key and start on its 7th note, that pattern of intervals is not going to be a major scale anymore, is it? It's going to be some other scale. And now, these 7, many of the scales on this page, which we originally looked at as being unique and individual patterns of intervals, we now begin to see actually all kind of knit themselves together into a system of modes. This is what modes are all about. If you take a scale, but you start on a different starting point within that scale, you're not playing the same scale anymore. You're playing some kind of new scale. These modes are always in the same order. Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian. I hope I did that right. And you're going to want to memorize those in order. Now, let's take a look at the slide rule here for a moment. We'll need to get in real tight on this. And look at these 7 modes here on this side of the slide rule over here. Now, notice how I have the slide rule set up right here to be in the key of C, just like we were looking at on the piano. And notice how, there it is, major scale, with half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. No sharps and flats at all. The key of C major obviously has those notes in it, but look at this next row, the 2nd mode, Roman numeral 2, Dorian mode, just like we said. Same notes again. But since you're starting on D, this half step is no longer between 3 and 4. It's now functioning as 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 8. The scale of D Dorian has exactly the same notes in it as C Ionian. Look at down here. If I start on E, if I start on the 3rd note, E and F, which originally was 3 and 4, is now 1 and flat 2. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Phrygian mode, E Phrygian has exactly the same notes in it as C Ionian. F Lydian has exactly the same notes. Now that B and C, which were 7 and 8, are now between sharp 4 and 5. Mixolydian, G Mixolydian, the scale of G Mixolydian has exactly the same notes in it as a C major scale. You're just starting on the 5th note of the major scale. A Aeolian is another scale that has exactly the same notes as all of these other scales have. And finally, our last mode, if a scale has 7 notes in it, it must have 7 modes. Locrian, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. But nonetheless, these are 7 scales that have exactly the same notes in it. Now, let's go back to this sheet over here. Remember our friends over here? Wow, I can play one scale over several different chords. No, when the chord changes, so must the scale change. See what's happening here? Even though what I was suggesting is all the white keys on the piano everybody thinks are a C major scale, they aren't just a C major scale. They're C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian. That's what this guy is trying to tell us over here. Modes. The same set of notes is several different scales. It's just a matter of asking yourself which note in the set is Do. How do you like that? So, back to our example of when I was jamming over that Eagles chord progression right there. I thought I was playing a G major scale the whole time, wasn't I? That's what I originally thought. But now what I'm discovering is maybe I was using those exact same notes, but they weren't really functioning as a G major scale anymore. You know, maybe I was using those same notes to function as several different scales depending on which chord I was playing over in the chord progression. Now what we're going to do is do this. Grab your slide rule. The example we gave on the piano was in the key of C, but remember this mode stuff works in every key. The example in this Eagle song is in the key of G. It's not in the key of C. So take your slide rule here and set the slide rule up so that G is now in your first window up here. Maybe we can zoom in just a little tighter on that. Now we're in the key of G. And now you'll notice that the notes that are in a G major scale are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. You do have one sharp in a G major scale. It's F sharp. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Now, look at this. Those are the same notes that are in A Dorian. Now, notice this. Dorian is a minor scale. Let's slide this up here for a moment. Can we just kind of tilt up? Look at the chords that we were playing in this song right here. Remember they were G, C, D, E minor, and A minor? If we can look at this now, take a look at this second row down here, the Dorian mode. Now, we thought we were playing a G major scale the whole time, but we're finding out that those exact same notes would form A Dorian. A Dorian has a flatted third in it. That C right there is only a step and a half above the root. It's functioning as the flatted third. Remember, Dorian mode is a minor scale, isn't it? And it's an A minor scale. So is it any great surprise for us to find then that in this song that there would be an A minor chord? When I was strumming that A minor chord, I thought I was playing a G major scale. But interestingly enough, in the end, I wasn't actually. I was actually playing A Dorian, which is a minor scale that was meant to go right along with that A minor chord right there in the chord progression. Now, here's Phrygian is the third mode. B, and remember Phrygian, that D right there is functioning as the flatted third. Phrygian, which has B Phrygian, which has exactly the same notes as G major, is a minor scale too, because see that D right there was originally functioning as the 5, but in the third mode here, it's only a step and a half above B, so it's really functioning as the flatted third. We might have seen a B minor chord in this song. It just so happens that we didn't. You know, you don't always see all of these chords. Some of the songs you play are only going to have 2 or 3 or 4 chords in them, maybe. But they're probably going to be ones that are out of this set right here. Notice this. If we look at the fourth mode of G Ionian is C Lydian. And Lydian has a major third in it. That E right there, which originally was functioning as the 6, is now the major third. It's 2 whole steps above C. So what was functioning a moment ago as a G major scale is now functioning as C Lydian, and since this is a major scale with the 3 and the 5 in it, remember note number 3 determines that this is a major scale, would it be a surprise for us then to expect that we might see a C major chord in this song? No, this is a textbook piece of music based on a set of modes relative to the key of G major. Now look at this, the next mode down here, Mixolydian, relative to the key of G, the 5th mode. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D. Same exact notes as in the G major scale. But notice how that F sharp now is 2 whole steps above the root. If you look at the number underneath it, that's functioning as note number 3. Mixolydian is a major scale. So it's a D major scale of some sort. It has a flat 7 in it, so it isn't exactly like the Ionian mode itself. But in the end, are we then surprised to see a D major chord in this song? No, not at all. Isn't this interesting? I thought I was playing a G major scale the whole time, but when that D major chord was being strummed, I wasn't playing a G major scale anymore. I was playing D mixolydian. D mixolydian has exactly the same notes in it as G Ionian. Finally, the 6th mode, look at that, Aeolian. And the root note here is E, the original 6th note of our major scale. E Aeolian. 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, 8. Again, has exactly the same notes in it as a G major scale. But notice this time. G, which was our original tonic note up here, G is now a step and a half above E. So it's actually in this mode functioning as the flatted 3rd, which means this is a minor scale, meant to go with a minor chord, an E minor chord. Are we then surprised to find out that this song has an E minor chord in it? Now, the last mode down here, F sharp, Locrian, we don't have and that's diminished because it has a flatted 3rd and a flatted 5th. We don't happen to have an F sharp diminished chord in the song, but that might have been another choice that the songwriter might have had for an additional chord to add to the song. So isn't this fascinating? You thought, when you were jamming over that Eagles song, you thought that you were playing a G major scale the whole time, but it turns out that you weren't. As a matter of fact, can you answer this question? When was the only time during that song that you were actually playing a G major scale? And you're thinking to yourself, when I started on the G note or something like that? And I go, no, actually, it didn't have anything to do with what you, the lead guitar player, did. It had more to do with what I was doing as the rhythm guitar player. The only time you were actually playing a G major scale is when I was strumming that G major chord. It almost didn't matter what you did. I was strumming a G major chord. Those notes were functioning as a G major scale. But what scale were you playing when I was strumming that D chord? You're thinking, wasn't I playing a G major scale still? And the answer is no, you were playing another scale that has exactly the same notes in it as a G major scale. What was it? If you look at your slide rule, the 5th mode down there is mixolydian. You were actually playing D mixolydian, and D mixolydian has exactly the same notes as G major. Wow. Now, do you see that this whole system of modes explains why we've seen so many songs that have this same chord progression in it? You know what? To look at the key of C, we don't have to look at this on camera, but slide your slide rule back so that you're in the key of C major, which is C is in the upper left-hand window up here. You know what? You can begin to predict what chords are actually going to show up in a song because these modes are always in the same order and they always have the same degree of majorness and minorness. If I was playing a song in the key of C, I might expect to see, actually let's put this up, we can look at this again. Might expect that if I was playing a song in the key of C that I might expect to see a C major chord because C major. I might also expect to see a D minor chord because Dorian is a minor scale. I might also expect to see an E minor chord in that song because Phrygian, the 3rd mode, is a minor scale. I might expect to see F Lydian. I might expect to see an F major chord in that song in the key of C because Lydian is a major scale because it has that major 3rd. I might also expect to see a G major chord in that song. And I might also expect to see an A minor chord in that song. If you think back, you might be able to think of a whole bunch of songs that you played that have C major, F major, G major, and A minor in them. Wow, gee. How about Let It Be by the Beatles? C, F, G, A minor. Those are the only chords in the entire song. They're working off this set of modes. Now, we're going to elaborate on this a little bit more next time. But here's basically what's going on here. I'm going to suggest this. Now, this is a horrible oversimplification in terms of modern music, you're going to find out. But this is, when it comes to the history of Western music, When it comes to the history of Western music, you're going to find out that an awful lot of songs are structured this way. And it goes like this. Most songs that you're going to play, we know that there are 12 notes in our pitch system, don't we? But most of the songs that we play do not contain all 12 notes. How do you like that? Most of the songs that we play do not contain all 12 notes. Most of the songs we play only contain 7 notes. Most songs only contain 7 notes out of the 12. Which 7? Question mark. Which 7? The 7 notes in a major diatonic scale in a given key. Most songs only contain 7 notes. Which 7 out of the 12? The 7 notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Remember, do, the octave do is the same alphabet letter as the first note. Most songs only contain 7 notes, the 7 notes in a given key. We looked at one example originally on the piano up here where we looked at everything in the key of C, and we found out that there were 7 scales that had the same notes as the C major scale. When we looked at the Eagles example, we saw that these chords, this chord progression here, could best be explained by understanding that these are the chords that would show up, that are the chords that could be made out of those 7 modes. Remember, each scale that you play contains a chord inside it. Major scales contain major chords. Remember, the structure of a major chord is 1, 3, 5. When you're strumming one of your chords on your guitar, when you're strumming a major chord on your guitar, the notes that you're strumming are 1, 3, 5 relative to that root note. When you're strumming a minor chord, you're strumming 1, flat 3, 5. You can check this out if you look at the spellings of your different chords in your finger charts. And remember, one subject we haven't gone heavily into yet is chords, but we're getting there soon. I've always found it's easier to explain scales to people first, interestingly enough. People tend to see the relationship between between scales and chords better if you start by explaining scales to them. And then you point out every scale you play has a chord inside it. And that relationship is pretty much what determines what chords are going to show up in a conventional song. So, most songs only contain 7 notes, the 7 notes in a major diatonic scale. What that means is the notes that are in the melody, all of the notes that are in the melody are just going to be notes within that scale. But the other really fascinating thing is the only chords that are going to be in that chord progression in that song are the set of chords that exist within the set of modes that evolve out of that scale. That's why we saw G, C, D, E minor, and A minor in that thing in the key of G. This whole subject is the subject of what's known as diatonic harmony. I'm just going to write down that word and then we're done. This is what's known as diatonic harmony, and we'll be talking more about this next week. Diatonic harmony is the structure in music that predicts that there are certain scale-chord relationships in conventional songs that all work within this set of modes and the chords that are embedded inside them. Isn't that mind-boggling? This may explain, I have this pie chart down here. This may explain 50% of the songs you've ever heard. 50% of the songs you've ever heard work in this very predictable arrangement of things. Now, why is that so significant? Because the rest of the pie is chopped up like this. There is no other organizational structure in music that accounts for anything remotely like that. That's all the time we've got for today. We got more to talk about this. I'm going to write these modes out next week. But how do you like that? I'm Scotty West, and for Absolutely Understand Guitar, thanks, and we'll see you next week, and keep practicing your stuff, okay? Bye-bye.